Hi everyone, my name is Altaf. I'm the chair of the branch. Today is our first of a series of AI talks by Professor Ashley Braganza and Dr. Weifeng Cheng. Quite an interesting topic that they're going to talk to us about on AI and work. And as you know, today AI is being developed in a very fast manner. It's speeding up and it's going to affect us in terms of jobs, how we live, what we do. And this is where Ashley and Weifeng are going to enlighten us on all these aspects in our daily life. Before I hand you over to both of them, if you please post your questions and we'll answer them at the end of after the end of the talk. Over to you, Ashley and Weifeng. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Altaf. And let me also thank all of you for attending today. I've lost sight of the slides, but as long as you can see them.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, the problem is I can't see the slides and I'm meant to be driving the. Nope.
Yeah, you're good. We're on the front page.
Yeah, hold on. Sorry, apologies. I've got to move these. It's opened up a whole new window, which is in the way. Okay, here we go. Start again. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today. My name is Ashley Braganza. I'm a professor in Brunel University. I'm Deputy Dean of the College of Business, Arts and Social Sciences. Weifeng.
Yeah, hi, hello everyone. My name is Weifeng Chen. I'm a senior lecturer in Brunel Business School. I'm also one of the founding members of the Artificial Intelligence Research Center in Brunel University. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So yes, as Altaf said, what we have is a series of 3 sessions. So today is going to focus on AI and work. And coming up at the next month is a session on business models. And then we're going to look at culture and leadership in the 3rd of the series, which is going to run in April. And one of the things we want to do is work with you, and hope you'll be joining us in those sessions as well. But one of the things we'd really like to do is to kind of co-create knowledge and to give you some added value for what you have done. And so as part of that, we are going to conduct a very quick, very short survey, and we'll give you the results hopefully at the end of today's session. So you'll see some of what we're looking to do, because I think while we are going to be covering some very interesting topics today, we really want to start to build towards some of the issues we're going to be covering in the future. So what I would like to do is this is the agenda. So we're going to open up with a few items just to kind of set the scene and get us started. The 2 areas that we want to focus on are based on some real work that we have done in the Center for AI, looking at gigification of work and the changing psychological contract. And specifically in the context of the psychological contract, for those of you who've been following the recent judgment on the case regarding Uber, I thought it would be really topical and timely to bring in that judgment and to see how the whole area is starting to change and develop even as I'm making this presentation. But to give you some kind of some of our latest thoughts and our latest insights based on that particular decision that's just been made. Don't worry, it's not going to turn out to be a legal presentation. It's really looking at what the business aspects are and how that's going to affect us in our jobs. Weifeng mentioned the Center for AI, and I founded the Center for AI back in 2018. And when we first started, there were just 3 of us. And over the last 3 years, we've grown the center to about 25, 27 people, touching just about every aspect or every discipline within Brunel, within the university. So we are working with engineers, with health scientists, life scientists. We're working with lawyers and legal people, with people in the arts, in humanities. We're working with a whole group of computer scientists. We've got a whole bunch of people who are coming together to look at this thing called AI, because our aim, and it's quite an ambitious aim, is to look at what are the policies and what are the practices that are going on in this space at 3 levels: at a societal level, at an organizational or an individual level, and then at a household or an individual level. And no one discipline, no one body of knowledge can cover all 3 of those areas unless we work in a coordinated and coherent way. And in addition to that, we've got relationships with universities and businesses, certainly all over the UK, but also stretching into Europe and wider afield into Australia and India and other countries as well. So we'd very much like you to take part and join us in this journey. So if you are interested, it would be lovely to hear from you as we go through. I should also mention we've set up an AI lab. Weifeng said I must mention this. And the AI lab, we've already put £150,000 into some initial kit, and that investment is going to grow. And we've got a physical and a virtual space where we can develop ideas, develop products, and look at how we can take those products to market. So a whole ecosystem is what we're looking to create in this AI lab. But now let me hand over to Weifeng, who's going to give us some contextual remarks on AI. Weifeng.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. So as you know, AI is everywhere today and growing, from enhancing human capabilities to automating repetitive tasks and streamlining customer services to improving business efficiency. AI is already making its way into everyday business processes. According to a PwC research recently, AI is likely to add 15.7 trillion US dollars to global economic growth by 2030. In the meantime, 30% of jobs in Britain could be automated by 2020. So the arrival of AI era is reshaping the source of value creation, the formation of new business models, which we're going to touch upon next time in the seminar, and also the delivery of value-added services such as mass customization, predictive maintenance, and building revenue streams from services related to products. As AI becomes more widespread in various aspects of business management and operations, investing in people will become even more important. So AI and automation will not displace people, that's our opinion, but rather combine their capabilities in new ways to create new forms of value and new opportunities. So the future belongs to companies that are certain ways to leverage technologies such as AI to empower their workforces. So investing in people becomes more important in this AI era. And also another recent Accenture survey done in conjunction with the World Economic Forum, they found that while nearly all workers, I mean 92%, they said, believe that the next generation workforce skills will be radically different from the prior one. And then 87% believes that within the next 5 years, very quickly, new technologies such as AI will improve their work experience. It also suggests that the workforce of the future will be younger, be creative, more creative, and solution-oriented, and the skills and empowered to leverage technology, including AI, to create new forms of value to their organizations. Next slide, please, Ashley. Yeah, this is a data we're going to present today. Is you can see from this slide, it is very clear that the governments around the world, around the globe, are developing national AI strategy, and the government readiness index between 2019 and 2020, you can see it shows the increase, the numbers of countries that that responded to AI has been really expanded, such as in countries like Russia, South Africa, Australia. They're all catching up, and I think you might want to glad to know is that UK is currently ranked as second in the world and the first in Europe. And now I'm handing over back to Ashley.
Great, thanks, Weifeng. So what you can begin to see is that there is an awful lot of data which is out there, which looks at this very high macro level, nation state level of AI readiness. What nobody is looking at is what we would refer to as the kind of micro level. What's going on in organizations? Are organizations ready? Is your organization ready for AI? Where do you stand relative to your competitors? And so what we would like you to do at this point is, and we will hopefully be able to show you the results by the end of the presentation, which is why we're kind of doing this a bit earlier than perhaps we might otherwise do it, is if I could ask you to open the chat box, you should see a link in the chat to a Brunel online surveys link. If I could ask you to go and click on that link, please, it should take you through to a very short survey. When I say it asked about 4 or 5 questions about your organization, it asks nothing about you personally, in case you're concerned. 4 or 5 very quick questions about your organization, its size, its age, etc. And then there are 20 statements, and it just asks you on a scale of 1 to 5, in effect, strongly agree to strongly disagree, just to select your responses for each of those statements. And this is in relation to organizations, your organization's readiness for AI. So we're going to pause here for a few minutes and ask you to click on that link, and then when once you've done that and come back,
yeah, the link is also appearing in the slides too, if you can't see it.
Yes. And if once you've done it, you could come back and type into the chat that you've done it, then it'll give us an indication of where people are.
Just another 2 more minutes and then we can continue, Ashley.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, if we don't get sufficient numbers responding, we won't be able to clearly show any results.
Just a question for the audience. Do you all see the chat facility? Because I'm not sure there is a question asking for the link.
I understood it was in the chat, but now when I look at it, hold on.
Maybe just use the link here on the slides, because
Sorry, I think that chat is not going to work. So I think we might have to continue.
Yeah, the chat only allows me to send things to the organization panelists.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so is there any way to get this link out to people?
Yes, so what we will be doing is we'll be sending out a survey at the end of the talk. And if you can complete that part of the survey, we'll put this link in there. If you can complete, that'll be appreciated.
Great, thank you, thanks. Okay, let's move on. What I wanted to show you here was the UK AI Council developed a roadmap, very different from the one you may have listened to yesterday. So a very different kind of roadmap, but it sets out the recommendations that the government they're suggesting the government should put in place to form part of the national AI strategy. And it's well worth reading if you can find the document, because it kind of sets out and reflects some of what I was saying earlier in terms of what the centre is looking to do, which is clearly there is recognition that the technology is going to have an impact at a societal, individual, and organizational level. And it's really interesting to look at some of the things that they are talking about, such as inclusion and the importance of trust, diversity. Look at the range of sectors they are talking about in terms of whether it's health or defense or security. So I think there are some really interesting insights into where at least the suggestion is that the UK ought to be looking at in terms of going forward. So what we wanted to do in these first few minutes is really just kind of set the scene a little bit. And now what we want to do is move on to the first of the two pieces of research and to look at what those mean in terms of your organizations. Weifeng, do you want to just take us through the model that we developed?
Oh, yes. Okay, thank you, Ashley. So yes, very recently in our very recent, as you can see, it's recently just published, very hot and fresh. Our research project just published in Production Planning and Control. We use the term gigification to describe those jobs that share characteristics of gig work. We have researched and examined the relationships between gigification, job engagement, and job satisfaction. In this study, we developed a theoretical framework, which presented here, as you can see, to examine the impact of system automation, AI-based enabled system automation on job satisfaction and job engagement, which we tested, used 232 survey responses based in respondents are many based in West London, around Stockley area, Stockley Park, Heathrow airports, Hillingdon mainly, and Brunel University, around Brunel University as well. Our findings show that while gigification increases job satisfaction engagement, AI-enabled system automation weakens the positive impact of gigification on this important work outcomes. These findings suggest that over time, the effects of AI-enabled automation on workers is that full-time permanent jobs will give away to gigified jobs. So yeah, now I'm going to hand over to Ashley to give you more insights of this study.
What we started to see was, if you look down the left-hand side of this chart, you see the sorts of skills that are in many different jobs, from the highly mechanical, repeatable, kind of those boring tasks, routine tasks that people have to do, all the way up to looking at things like social and emotional skills that people need when doing a particular job. And sitting in the middle is this notion that there are some jobs that require some level of creative thinking, some level of innovation, as well as some level of experience that needs to be built up in order to do the job. And this study was particularly focused on jobs in the operations and supply chain area. And what we were looking at is where the effects of automation, which is partial automation or partial use of AI, or significant use of AI. And what the various colored codes in the boxes represent are either permanent jobs, jobs that are being eliminated, or jobs that, in our view, are being gigified. And as I say on the left-hand side, they're gigification, or jobs that are being gigified. This is a process of moving or automating full-time permanent work into jobs that look like and feel like gig work. And what our findings were showing is that actually, if you're looking at highly mechanical type skills over a period of time, increasing numbers of these jobs are going to either be eliminated or gigified. The numbers of kind of full-time jobs in this space are going to be very limited. Likewise, with creative jobs or jobs that have a creative element or require some level of experience in order to develop, again, what you begin to see is that the numbers of full-time permanent jobs are again likely to decrease. The number of jobs being eliminated, maybe not so much, but again, the number of jobs that are being gigified that need these skills are going to be increased. And if you look at the literature and you look at past research, the jobs that had a very high social or emotional skill content were deemed to be the least likely to be affected by AI. And what we've seen and what we find is that actually even those jobs are not safe with this technology. Again, the propensity for the technology to either eliminate these jobs or to be able to gigify these jobs is quite considerable. And so for us, part of, and as you'll see where we're going towards the end, part of what I think organizations need to start thinking about is what is their profile in terms of their workforce and how their workforce is going to be created. What I want to do now is move on to the area of psychological contract. And in the field of contracts of employment, there are many different types of contracts of employment. Okay, and for the purposes of today, I'm just going to talk about two contracts of employment. So these are the formal written documents. These are the formal terms and conditions that an employee and an employer would enter into. So if you look at, if you think about someone joining for the first time, once the terms and conditions are negotiated, they will receive a formal contract of employment. Okay. What you also have are what we would call psychological contracts. And for us, psychological contracts are really based around people's perceptions. This is the set of beliefs that each of us have when we come into contact with an organization that is either employing us or we have some kind of relationship with. I don't mean as a customer, but as a worker or something that we are doing for that organization. There is a set of perceptions, there is a set of beliefs that we have about that relationship, and these contracts are not written down anywhere. They're not formalized anywhere, and so they exist as a set of perceptions, and as I say, as a set of beliefs. And what we started to do was we started to look at psychological contracts, and in particular, how we could kind of get them, how we could get you to think about these psychological contracts. And what we did was we created a continuum, and the continuum at the right hand end, you've got highly interdependent relationships. So this is where I, as an employee or as a worker, I feel that my organization depends on me and I depend on my organization. So there's an interdependency between in that relationship. And if that's a kind of one end of the continuum, at the other end of the continuum is a highly independent relationship. So here there is no ongoing bond between the employer and me. And what we have here is a much looser arrangement, a much looser coupling between me as a worker and the organization that I'm working for. So for me, this is about understanding that where people are on that continuum. And in relation to psychological contracts, according to Rousseau, who came up with this notion, you can have psychological contracts which are much closer to the interdependent end, which she refers to as being relational. And so these are contracts where I, as an employee, feel like I'm going to be developed over time. I have some level of job security. I'm going to get a regular salary or a regular salary in terms of a job that I've been taken on to do. I'm going to be given some level of responsibility, and that with that responsibility comes some power, some status, some level of image of where I am in the hierarchy. Very often these relational contracts are based on long-term relationships. They're open-ended. I'm going to be an employee until either I do something wrong or until I decide to leave, or something significant happens and I may have to leave, but I don't at any given moment in time. My belief is that this is going to be an ongoing, longer-term relationship. Transactional relationships tend to be much more time-bound, very specific. So what you have there is very much the likes of a contractor that will come in, that will be asked to do a job. They will negotiate their wage or their fee in terms of what that job is, and provided both parties reach an agreement of what it is that needs to be delivered in return for some level of remuneration that both agree with, then that works, because both sides know what they are getting in that economic exchange. Both sides know what they are getting and over what period of time things have to be delivered. So a transactional relationship, again, as Rousseau describes as being one that is very clearly laid out between and understood between the two parties. But what our work showed is, if you take this relationship and you mediate it with technology, if you take the employer-employee relationship and you mediate it, i.e. you put technology or an AI platform, an AI system between the two, then what you end up with, and this is new, this is what we have contributed, is you end up with an alienational psychological contract. And by an alienational psychological contract, it's one which tends to be mediated by technology, as I've said, but where that interaction between the employer and the worker, between the person doing the work and the organization, tends to be done through an algorithm, tends to be done through some technology platform. And decisions are very often based around data. And so provided, if a certain threshold is achieved, then someone will be rewarded or someone may well be punished on the back of that. And this notion of alienational psychological contracts is really interesting when you look at the more recent case of Uber. And I must, given that particularly as this is being recorded, I should tell you that the judgment only came out on Friday, and we've gone through it and thought about this. But clearly, this is our interpretation, okay, or at least it's my interpretation of what has gone on and what the effects of this might well be. So, if you take the case of Uber and look at what was going on in that particular case, what you begin to see is that the position that Uber took in terms of their view of the drivers was that their view was that this was a transactional relationship. The agreement between Uber and the drivers are very much that of a contractor, and in fact, when you look at the judgment, Uber's position was, and I'm not going to take you through a line-by-line reading of the judgment, and I'm not going to turn this. I don't want this to turn into a legal argument here. But if you look at where the parties were positioned, Uber was basically saying our relationship with our drivers is that of a contractor. In other words, they were saying this is a transactional relationship. It's not an employer-employee relationship. But from the perspective of the drivers were saying, actually, we feel that this is an alienational. My words, not theirs, okay? But when you look at what was being said in the judgment, and I'm interpreting the words that are in the judgment, if you look at what was being said, the drivers were in effect saying this is an alienational relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. And when you dig down into what was being said, then when you start to dig into it, actually what you begin to see is actually, in our view, the relationship is that of an alienational psychological contract. And why am I saying this? What kind of brings me to this point? And the reason I'm saying this is that all of what was going on between Uber, the organization now, and the drivers was all being mediated through the Uber app. The metrics are collected via the app in terms of the driver's performance. All of the key points of contact between the driver and Uber are via the app. All of that interaction happens primarily through the app. The app is based on a set of algorithms, and those algorithms take decisions. And if you look at the driver's input to those algorithms or into any of that decision making, the answer is they had none. So from what we can see in our analysis using this particular lens, our view is that this was an alienational psychological contract. And what was really interesting is if you look at the judgment, and I put the page references there if you should want to go and have a look at it, is that the Supreme Court justices are saying that actually that's right. Uber does fix the driver's remuneration. There's no negotiation, which is what you would expect in a transactional relationship. Uber says this is what the ride is worth, and you can go below it, but you can't go above it. Uber dictates the services that they perform. They even set the route that the driver needs to follow. And if the driver deviates from that route, then they could be penalized, or that they certainly it's not positive if they start to deviate from the levels of service. The extent to which drivers have a choice as to which rides they accept and which ones they don't is very constrained, because if they fall below a certain level of acceptance or cancellation, they get penalized for that. So again, you've got this technology that's controlling what the drivers can and can't do. If you look at the rating system, again, if the drivers fall below a certain level of the rating system, which according to the judgment was 4.4 out of 5, then that starts to issue, the driver starts to get a set of automatic warnings, leading ultimately to a termination of the relationship. And this is all potentially being done by the app, working kind of autonomously to anything else. And Uber's controls the communication between the passengers and the drivers, and actually discourages anything other than what is absolutely necessary in terms of communication between the two. And I've taken this point from the actual judgment, and what I was saying is that the app was designed to operate coercively, and it was perceived, and keyword there, perceived, which is all about the psychological contract. It was perceived by drivers to be a form of delivering a penalty if the drivers failed to deliver what they said they're going to do, or particularly in this case, accepting a certain amount of rides that they were going to do. So what you begin to see just in this situation here is that Uber was very much in control. And here's what's interesting. Okay, here's what's interesting is you start with these two positions where the drivers are saying we're in an alienational relationship, psychological contract. Uber saying no, this is a transactional thing. Our drivers are our contractors, and they've got the freedom to work when they want to, and work or not work, or log on when they want to, or not when they don't. So you've got these two positions. And what the Supreme Court judgment, and this is why I think it's really key, this judgment's really interesting, has done, is it's taken the drivers actually all the way across to a almost relational, but not quite, because in effect, the Supreme Court judgment has now classified Uber drivers as being workers. Now, in law, and again, I don't want to turn this into a legal argument here, but in law, workers are kind of one down from employees, and workers have rights. And so you begin to see what this judgment has done is it's moved the drivers to where they're almost kind of sitting between the transactional and the relational psychological contract, and are therefore saying, you now have some rights, whether it's to the minimum wage or to benefits. Fact is, you've got some rights. And you can begin to see how that psychological contract has now shifted very considerably. Okay, and so we thought it would be really interesting to kind of show you how this works. And I think that this judgment is going to fundamentally affect the relationship between platform businesses and the people that work for not just Uber but all platform businesses. I think it's you can begin to see now that Uber is already starting to say, well, no, it's not. It only, there was a small number of drivers that were party to this case, and it's saying that this doesn't affect all the drivers. And there are counter arguments, and I would imagine the story's not over yet. There will be no doubt further legal challenges about how these drivers are considered in turn, given the outcome of this judgment. But I think this is going to have a significant effect on how people who are working for platform businesses begin to think about their psychological contract. So let me move on then to the issues that we think that organizations ought to be focused on, and leaders ought to be focused on. And so just a very quick summary on some of the things that we think ought to be done. The first is, I think people need to recognize that these AI applications are spreading, and in spite of this case, and whilst it may require organizations to pause for breath and maybe have a think, I don't for a minute believe that it's going to stop the spread of AI. Okay, this is going to continue on, and platform businesses are going to grow and will themselves change and morph. So I think there are lessons to be learned here, because this is not the first time a new technology has come in and changed industry and how things work. I think you can begin to see that from the time of Henry Ford and the invention of the production line, jobs have been lost and jobs have been created. And I think we are going to be in that cycle of jobs being lost and jobs being created. And that's the notion of gigification. I think it's really important that organizations have some kind of ethical frame for decision making. I look at a lot of the methodologies and a lot of the ways in which organizations are told to go about developing their activities in AI, and very often the notion of looking at and having an ethical frame of reference is very often left quite late to the end, and I'm suggesting it ought to be brought quite up the chain and up the timeline earlier rather than later. And I give you as an example, if you think over the COVID period, and you think of Boohoo, another platform business primarily, and how they were dealing with their employees. You need an ethical frame of reference. I think it's really important for organizations to start to think about their AI transformation strategy. Again, it's really critical that organizations start to think about what this means at a strategic level. How are you going to go about exploiting the benefits, but equally managing against competition? Okay, and because it is going to become a fiercely competitive market, and you can already begin to see on the high street and elsewhere how incumbent organizations are almost being kind of just taken out because new players are coming in and who don't have a lot of that baggage and are able to grow much bigger than the incumbents. I mean, you'll all be familiar with Arcadia and its demise, and actually the two organizations that have bought up the crown jewels of Arcadia have been, I think between the two of them, they're about 20 years old, and Arcadia has been going for years, and Topshop and some of those other brands have been going even longer. So you can begin to see that having an AI transformation strategy is really important. And part of that strategy is this is going to bring about changes to structures, processes, procedures, systems, internal systems. It's going to bring about very significant changes. I think it's really important that organizations evaluate their gigification options. There are societal implications here. If you can begin to see that it is at one level very easy. You start to put very tight and stringent controls on people, or get rid of large swathes of jobs. But clearly there are social implications in some of the decisions that are and will be taken. Need to understand the changes in the psychological contract. I think it's really important, and I think the case that I've illustrated kind of shows how important it is for organizations not just to think about the hard terms and conditions, but how do people feel? What is this affecting in terms of how people perceive their relationship with the people that they're working for? I guess number 7 ties into some of the points that were raised above in terms of having an ethical frame. what this technology does, it is allows significant control over people. You can measure anything and everything. You can have sensors. You've seen some viral videos where people have put sensors into toilets in the office to time when people go in and to time when people come out. You can put huge controls. Some of these technologies enable that control to be put in place. And so you can measure and have data on anything and everything you choose to, but somewhere there needs to be a balance between using that data to control people or to coerce people at one level versus innovating in terms of products and services and being at the forefront of the marketplace. Finally, I would say that as with every change initiative, communicate. So there's never a shortage of the need for communication and letting people know what they need to do. So those for me would be the top 8 actions in terms of what to look for. I'd like to thank you for your attention. It's been a pleasure being with you virtually. And I was hoping at this point, if we had had some responses to the survey, we would have been able to show you some of the results. But what we can do is send the link, as Altaf said. And if you would be so kind as to complete that, your responses are completely confidential. We do not release your name or and we don't even ask for your organization's name, mind you. But we do not release any of that information. We will only look at the aggregate results and do some analysis on those. And yes, we'd be most grateful if you could do that, and it'll give you a sense check as to where you are and what your levels of organizational readiness is for your organizations. But we're open to questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Weifeng, as well. You mentioned about obviously with this AI developing, you will have jobs being lost and gained. What should we be doing? Should we be worried?
I think we should be preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, as these things usually are. I really do think, and I'm taking the question to be at the level of the individual here, Altaf. I personally would say, start preparing for a future which is going to bring in a significant amount of change. It's about, Weifeng mentioned the skills that are needed for operating in this new environment, and it is really important that we keep ourselves up to date in terms of the skills that organizations are looking for. Not all of them have to do with coding and data science, although an awful lot is in that space at the moment. But we've just started a master's in AI strategy. It's due to launch in September. And the whole purpose of that master's program is to start to give people the skills to say, well, how do we take this into the board? How do we get the board to recognize what's going on here? How do we behave ethically? How do we ensure that we are on the right side of the regulations? How do we ensure that our leaders can lead in this new world? Some of you may well be familiar with some of this language about humans in the loop, on the loop, or in charge. Well, if you've got that situation, what does that mean in practice? What does that mean in a day-to-day basis when someone comes into work? And if I said to you tomorrow, you go into your work and you are a human in the loop, what does that mean for you? What are you going to do differently? Well, do you see what I mean? So these are all phrases that people are banding about, but we need to start to think about, well, what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for if I'm in a leadership position? What does that mean for the people working in this organization?
Thank you. Do we have national AI ethical standards in par with ISO standards for quality, safety, etc.?
There are standards that are being created. There are standards in various forms of development. There is an AI standard that I believe is still being worked on. I don't think it's been published. I've not looked recently, but there are various ethical and other standards that are out there. Having read through many of them, part of my concern is that, particularly on the ethical standards, is that sometimes they set the bar so high that it's almost as though, well, I can't even take the first step until I've ticked umpteen boxes. And by the time I've ticked those umpteen boxes, actually I'm likely to reach a conclusion which says, I can't take the first step because whatever that first step isn't going to be ethical. So in my part of what I think needs to happen in terms of all of these standards is to actually kind of make some sense of them and to figure out how we can actually put these into practice, which is part of what we're doing in terms of the Center for AI, is starting to go through some of those issues with colleagues who are lawyers, with colleagues who are computer scientists, with colleagues who are life scientists and who have a completely different language to someone simple out of a business school. But really, we need to understand this from an interdisciplinary perspective to understand how we can make this happen. So we have ethicists working on the team, and it's really interesting when you start to kind of unpick some of these arguments with people from those sorts of areas of expertise. So yeah, we are definitely working on how do you prepare people for this new era, as Weifeng said.
Would we have a choice, a say, if we take in the AI world, taking an example of Uber, where the app tells us what needs to be done and controls our work as such?
Sorry, I missed that, Altaf. I couldn't catch the whole question. Say that again, please.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Let me just read that again. So will we have a say, a choice in this new AI world? Taking the example of Uber and the app, where the app is dictating where we go, what we do, and how we do things.
I think this is for me, the jury is out on this, right? Because and this is going to be genuinely a three-way or three-pointed. There are 3 points in this triangle. So there are the employees, and based on some other work that we're doing, you begin to see that as the technology gets rolled out, it becomes increasingly able, or organizations become increasingly able to atomize people. In other words, you don't treat people as groups, you treat them as individuals, and therefore we are all weaker when we are acting on our alone than when we are in a group, right? So on the at one point in this triangle, you've got employees and people like you and me, right? We're trying to earn a crust and make our way in the world. Okay, so that's one point in the triangle. At the other point in the triangle, you've got organizations who are looking to grow, compete, deliver shareholder value, and in some ways create wealth. And we need organizations because they create the wealth that is in the economy, right? And you see what happens when organization slows down, as they've done or have to do over the last 12 months at COVID. You see what happens to the economy, it tanks. So we need organizations, right? And they're not going to go, and nor should they go away anyway anytime soon. But they are a key party to this. And then the third point, and this is where it gets really interesting, is it depends on what the outlook is on the government, or any government that happens to be in charge. And you can begin to see, and I'm going to open this one up hugely, but just look at how different countries and in the world have adopted legislation, or have put out legislation as to what can and can't be done with using these technologies. So whether it's if you take China and look at how China, for example, is implementing smart systems and AI, think about what happened in terms of the use of AI and AI-driven technologies underpinning, some of what was being talked about in terms of not so much the 2020 election, but the 2016 US election. You look at how governments are then responding to some of these things and what the legislative framework is. I think that will have a big impact on the answer to where that balance of control will lie, because you can begin to see that potentially the balance of control could be swung all the way to organizations, and we as workers or customers for that matter may not have much control. It could swing the other way. The judgment clearly has swung in the favor of the workers and employers in this particular case. So I would say that the answer to the question is, I think the jury is out, and I think that kind of negotiation is taking place even as we speak, and we want to be, and hence running these sessions is part of kind of raising that level of awareness of colleagues, and then engaging in that debate, engaging in that discussion. And as I say on this slide, I promise I'll stop pushing it, is please do join us, please do contact us if you're interested in this or any other comments. Yeah, please.
Just thank you. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. Yes, I think just conscious of time, but there's an interesting question here. Is what do you think the government's responsibility is in the process of transitioning to a gig economy?
So, what is the government's responsibility in terms of?
Is in the process of transitioning to a gig economy.
Or what should the government be doing in this space? So I think that there needs to be a concerted effort to look at the skills that people have, and I think that issue of skills needs to be looked at almost, you can chunk this at very many different age groups. So whether you're talking about students in schools that need to understand how some of this works and what this means for them, if you look at people in there at almost any age group. So I think there is a need to get people to learn and to develop their skills and think about how they can contribute here. I think there's also an issue around looking at how government policy can create an environment for people to genuinely try to use this technology to start up and grow their own businesses. I think what we can see from the gigification of work that we've done is, if this starts to happen, people are going to be entering the gig economy, and therefore, and with that comes a whole set of issues. So if you're an employee and you've got a regular salary coming in every month, then you go to becoming a gig worker. There is huge income volatility. So what frameworks are there for giving people some kind of safety net so that they don't fall foul of the fact that 1 month they've got an income which is high and can doing well, and another month it happens to be a lean month. So it's about putting in place those sorts of support mechanisms to ensure that people have some kind of base from which they can, even if given the volatility that they may experience, that they have some base from which to work. I think the other issues around developing communities, and not just local communities, but communities that allow people to build networks, both locally, nationally, and internationally, and supporting people in that as a way to ensure that they are able to find that work wherever it may be.
Can I just on top of whatever, sorry, top of what Ashley mentioned, because if you see the presentation earlier, UK government from 2018, they have set up this AI council, so to promote the adoption of the AI technology. And just want to reflect what Professor Braganza said regarding the opportunities providing for training. You might be aware, I just want to say that the UK British government has offering some scholarships of AI programs. So for instance, the AI program we are offering, you can apply for government scholarships to further your skill, understanding of AI technology, and also adoption strategy as well. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Weifeng. That was very interesting. Conscious of the time, but it was a great talk. Thank you, and thank you to everyone out there.